Nature's forces helped create and shape the planet on which we live. They are all part of the natural order of things. Yet when this powerful energy interacts with people, the results can be devastating.
Approaching the coast, so we're just starting the long period of about 12 to 16 hours where we're going to experience the thrust of this hurricane.
All across the world, we go about our daily routines, calmly, confidently coexisting with nature. But at any moment, that confidence can be shattered, and we are reminded that nature has the upper hand. When we least expect it, when we're least prepared, nature strikes.
Yes. So it's important for you to... Oh, fight!
The quake that hit San Francisco in 1989 was actually centered 80 kilometers away, near a mountain called Loma Prieta.
I just held on to dear life.
There was a sudden movement like this, shaking of the whole store, rattling, I mean, the roof, everything, the beams.
My TV screen popped out, and glass began to break, you know, things like that. A big marble table flew across the room and shattered like glass almost, you know.
The Loma Prieta earthquake lasted only 15 seconds, but in that quarter minute, Northern California suffered $6 billion in damage, and 62 people lost their lives.
Earthquakes are not nice. The ground is moving beneath one. The very essence of stability is questioned. And that's quite apart from the damage, the destruction, the deaths. There's something awful about an earthquake, and it's not fun at all.
My guess is that earthquakes are really so scary because you don't have any warning. It's the only thing besides a nuclear war that can really, 1 second you're living in a big, beautiful city, and 10 seconds later it's flat.
Every day, the Earth is shaken by hundreds of small earthquakes. Most go unnoticed. They usually occur along the boundaries of the thin plates that cover the Earth like an eggshell. Driven by the heat deep within the Earth's core, the plates grind against each other on long lines called faults. When the plates find their motion blocked, stress builds up. Finally, the fault gives way. The released energy races through the Earth in the form of seismic waves. One place where the boundary between plates is dramatically evident is along the San Andreas Fault. This is the source for most of California's earthquakes. But for California, as for much of the world, the movement of plates like these is also an indispensable creative force.
If we didn't have earthquakes, if we didn't have this great flow of heat from the interior of the Earth would be a cold, dead place. There'd be no continents, no oceans, no atmospheres. The Earth would be as dead and dry and cold as the moon. Everywhere you look in California, the hills are really created by the action of the earthquakes for the most part.
Earthquakes have been shaping the landscape of California for eons. However, once civilization gets in the way, these creative natural forces become destructive. Yet people seem to insist on building and living on unstable ground. And as geologists and engineers warn, earthquakes don't kill people, buildings do. Certain structures like bridges and freeways are especially vulnerable to tremors. In San Francisco's quake, most of the deaths occurred on the Nimitz Freeway, when a section of the upper deck collapsed on the roadway beneath. Ed McVie was driving a freight truck when it happened.
There was no traffic, and I was doing about 55, and all of a sudden it felt like I had a blowout. I had no control over the truck. Luckily, there was nobody beside me because I was just all over the place. I hit the brakes. In the rearview mirror, I could see what looked like the freeway falling, and that didn't make any sense. I saw cars and trucks disappearing underneath the rubble, and I just knew I was dead. I had no way of getting out of it. There was nothing I could do.
McVie was lucky that day. His truck just happened to stop under the only section of freeway that didn't fall.
I don't deal with it as well as people think I do. I can be driving along anywhere, and all of a sudden I've got freeway falling down on top of me.
Ed McVie escaped without a scratch. 42 other motorists died. Unfortunately, earthquakes in large cities are not rare events.
When you look at a map of the world and plot the truly great cities of the world and compare it with a map of the great, really destructive earthquakes of the last 1,000 years, there's an almost one-to-one correspondence.
Yet people continue to settle on these hotbeds of seismic activity, unable to control the forces beneath them, not knowing when they will strike. Energy from the sun interacts with air and water, creating constantly changing weather, which can develop into tornadoes, the most violent of storms. Tornadoes strike with the intensity of a quake and the surgical precision of a guided missile. With the advent of video camcorders, these powerful events are now being well documented by home movie makers. Sometimes a cameraman gets more than he bargained for. On a lakeshore in Minnesota, an idyllic summer afternoon is about to be transformed by the arrival of a tornado.
Look at their funnels.
Within seconds, curiosity will give way to panic.
Oh, power line just went out. Power line just went out. Look at them. Oh, power lines. I'm getting every power line out. This is cool. Here it comes. Here it comes. Here it comes. It's right out here. I'm 10 feet from it, and all the electricity, all the power lines are going. Inside. We're filming. We're filming. I'm taking it right there. Don't stand by the windows. Get away from the windows. The tree just blew over. Look at the tree over. Look at the top. Get away from the windows. Get away. Get away. Get away. Get away. Get away. Where is everybody? Oh my God. Are you guys okay?
These tornado survivors were incredibly lucky. There were no injuries and only superficial damage. The devastation is usually far worse. A tornado can strike in any country, but more twisters develop over the Midwestern United States than anywhere else. And in their wake, they leave a trail of destruction and despair. Simulated in a laboratory, a tornado is fairly simple to analyze. It's really a whirlpool of converging opposites. Upwelling warm air confronts down-tumbling cool. Dry air encounters moist. Winds aloft collide with winds below. In nature, that produces torrential rains, dangerous lightning, and hailstorms, and violent winds that can approach 500 kilometers per hour. Tornadoes travel fast, especially across the flat landscape of the plains. When a television news crew found themselves trapped in the path of a Kansas twister, their only sensible option was to find cover.
Go, go, go. Shoot it. You better floor it. You better floor it. Shoot it. Keep going, man. Keep going. Faster? No. Yeah. Lots faster. Lots faster. Lots faster, Greg. It's catching us. You gotta go, buddy. You gotta really go. You gotta blaze. Yeah, we want to jump out. We want to get in front of the van. Get under here. Keep rolling. Yeah, I'm rolling. Get up under the girders. Is that where we want to go? Yes. Underneath the girders. Keep rolling, Ted. It's coming at us. Keep rolling. Okay. Hang on, you'll be fine. Hang on to the girders. Don't worry about it. Hang on, Ted. That's what you're doing.
Tornadoes are among the most destructive of all natural phenomena. And in the United States alone, they're responsible for dozens of deaths every year. But a tornado cuts a narrow path and rarely lasts for more than 20 minutes. Hurricanes are the most dramatic displays of nature's large-scale fury. One storm could reach from New York to Chicago. In the Western Hemisphere, the islands of the Caribbean and the southeast coast of the United States are prime targets for hurricanes. The most destructive natural disaster in U.S. history was Hurricane Andrew. When Andrew struck Florida on August 23, 1992, its winds were clocked at more than 250 kilometers per hour. And they were still climbing when they broke the wind gauge at the National Hurricane Center. The storm hit hardest just south of Miami. Though it came and went overnight, Andrew, like all natural disasters, left behind a legacy of ruin. Before it began its rampage across South Florida, Andrew was born, like most hurricanes, as a cloud disturbance off the African coast. Swirling storms are formed when warm, moist air rises and cools. The storms grow larger and faster as they race westward, developing into violent hurricanes that can rip through the West Atlantic from June to November. The hurricane center, known as the Eye, remains calm. But the eye walls are packed with intense thunderstorms that generate fierce, gusty winds. And winds have rarely been as savage as Andrew's. The storm left a total of 62 people dead, and it left parts of South Florida a wasteland.
This hurricane caused more destruction of property than any other natural disaster in the history of the United States. We're talking of the order of $15 to $30 billion.
It could have been much worse. Andrew just missed the densely populated center of Miami. As it was, 160,000 people were forced from their homes. Besides the thousands of personal tragedies, there was an immense environmental problem. In one day, Hurricane Andrew created at least 3 million tons of garbage. There was enough burnable debris to fuel fires at more than 100 sites, at some of them 24 hours a day. The smoke was bad enough, but Andrew created other more insidious dangers. Mike Palmer's specialty is containing hazardous and toxic spills. After Andrew, he and his crew sifted through devastated neighborhoods for household hazards.
Now, what you may normally see with one house, you know, the typical chemicals they'll have, like, you know, a small thing of acetone and a thing of brake fluid, and here's some clear stain. You know, you'd say, well, what's the big deal? You know, how bad can this really be to the environment? Well, you know, if I open this up and I poured it on the ground here, you know, would it absolutely contaminate the groundwater for this whole area? No, probably wouldn't. But we don't have that here. What we've got here is we've got these quantities or more in every single house. And if these equipment comes in here and they rupture these containers and it goes into the environment all at once like that, it is too much.
This is only a fraction of the hazardous waste recovered from the wreckage of thousands of homes. No one knows how much toxic material remained unaccounted for. In the chaos following Hurricane Andrew, human survival is the priority, but other animals are victims too. Miami's Metro Zoo lay directly in Andrew's path. The zoo suffered serious losses, including hundreds of prized tropical birds and 5 large mammals. Miraculously, most of the animals came through unharmed, even though they were out in the open, exposed to the fierce intensity of the storm. Many of the zoo's exhibits were ruined, and it will take decades to replace the crucial shade trees. In the aftermath of a hurricane, survivors must try to make the best of what remains. But the residents of South Florida must also come to terms with the certainty that another big hurricane is on the way. The long-term problem is that people build their homes in the areas most vulnerable to tropical storms. If coastal development continues, more and more people will find themselves in the paths of major hurricanes. Most natural disasters hit quickly, but a flood is a disaster in slow motion. It can last as long as the rain continues to fall, as long as the water continues to rise. The people who live along the Mississippi Valley are accustomed to the river's periodic rise and fall. They've often joined battle to preserve their homes. However, 1993 brought a deluge like none before. The Mississippi became a monstrous adversary, and the struggle would last for months. The waters from nearly 1/4 of North America drain down the upper Mississippi and Missouri rivers. In the spring of '93, their tributaries were overwhelmed by relentless rain, turning the land between the rivers into what some called a sixth Great Lake. By mid-July, with record crests converging at St. Louis, dozens of towns downriver faced the danger of being wiped off the map. Towns like St. Genevieve, Missouri. For St. John, the battle began in April. By mid-July, the Mississippi had claimed most of Main Street and dozens of other low-lying houses, and the river was still on the rise. Where the waters were held at bay, the town owed its safety to a makeshift wall of sandbags and an extraordinary volunteer crusade. People from all walks of life, from the locals to the National Guard, joined hands to try to save what was left of St. John. The battle raged all summer long as the river continued to rise. But in one way, the people of the Mississippi Valley were fortunate. As they waited for each new crest, they could prepare for the onslaught. One of those leading the fight was Vern Baughman, a local contractor. Vern was president of the Downtown Levee District, the agency responsible for maintaining the dikes now swallowed by the river.
That's another one.
He coordinated the efforts to save what was left of the town.
Did you get any sleep tonight?
Yep.
Well, what, 15 minutes or what? We got contractors, we got the National Guard in here, and a lot of civilian help and local people here. And we just coordinating everything and trying to get the units to work together.
The rising tide had brought a flood of people to the town as well, nearly 10,000 from 34 different states. Bag by bag, the people built their defenses against one of the greatest rivers on earth. But in spite of all their efforts, after 2.5 months of flooding, more than half of St. Genevieve lay underwater. For 10,000 years, the Mississippi has carved the great floodplain of the American Midwest. Only in the last few centuries has civilization encroached on the river's domain. To fight the water's wandering course and the inevitable floods, the levees had been built to hem the river in. As the river walls were extended and raised to hold back even greater crests, the speed and pressure of the waters built up behind them. When the river could no longer be held back, it would strike with a force and impact multiplied by the tremendous volume. Throughout history, people have settled on floodplains, taking advantage of their fertile soil and the river's resources. In many places, they must be protected from river flooding by artificial levees, and levees have a tendency to fail, sometimes with devastating results. Around St. Genevieve, even where the levees were higher than the crest of the flood, the river could still find a way to penetrate them. After 8 waterlogged weeks, trouble spots were cropping up on the earthen walls.
Better get some bags here quick.
Even a small seep of water could pose a grave threat. In just minutes, this situation went from threat to catastrophe. Unwilling to give in after fighting so long, Vern Baughman took one last gamble and drove out to the break. With luck, Vern hoped to stem the tide and buy time for those families whose homes stood in the water's way. He took earth from wherever he could, even the footings of the levee beneath him. As hard as he worked, he was no match for the river. Soon the outcome was clear. All that remained was to pull men and machines off the crumbling embankment and evacuate the houses behind.
There was 2 chances, slim and none, once that truck fell in. What amazed me about the whole thing is how quick it went.
Throughout the Midwest, the floods of 1993 took a tremendous toll. $10.5 billion in damage, 56,000 homes flooded or destroyed, almost 100,000 square kilometers underwater, and some 50 lives lost to the river. As for the town of St. Genevieve, it had been saved, at least most of it, but hundreds of buildings were lost or damaged. St. John can't afford many more victories like this one. In some places, not until October would the river at last fall back, leaving behind the rank, viscous mud they call gumbo. There were important lessons to be learned from the flood. In the past, most victims returned and rebuilt. But this time would be different. In some places, the river will be allowed to keep the land it reclaimed. Much of the low-lying farm areas will be left open for future flooding. Many families and even entire towns have decided to give up the struggle and move to higher ground, where they'll be safe the next time the river floods. Nature can be violent, and we live in the midst of its powerful forces. As much as we try to predict, explain, and ultimately just survive the powers of nature, when they strike, we are reminded that these forces cannot be controlled, cannot be conquered.